Hi guys and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today involves some pretty gruesome stuff. Obviously, I will describe them, not into super detail, but I'll also give you a warning before that comes up just in case you don't really want to know the finer details of it. It's a pretty disturbing case. But it's about a man called Roch Thériault and what his following became known as the Ant Hill Kids. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this. It's a case from Canada. It was like initially a community of what people thought was like freedom of speech, just like a community that supported themselves, but it would turn very sour under Roch's leadership and become more disturbing than anybody would have ever thought about. And I mean, you're probably thinking, like, I've warned you now, Anna, but I don't think you really think, if you don't already know this case, you're not going to think the extremes that he actually went to, because I was pretty shocked by them, to be honest. It was a literal, like, horror house, like a horror movie, what he made his followers endure. Anyway, this case was actually suggested by my Patreon, KU, so thank you so much for suggesting this, and your support has just been amazing. Obviously everyone's support on YouTube is, but then going on the Patreon and going that little bit extra is just, I can't thank you enough for that. It means the world to me, and it is very generous of you, so thank you so much for that. However, let's just jump into this crazy, wacky case. Roch Thériault was born in the Saguenay Valley of Quebec in 1947 to Hyacinthe and Pierrette Thériault. And I apologise if I said these names wrong, because I'm no good at them, as you guys know. There you go. So, according to Roch, his father was quite abusive towards him in his childhood. However, his father would fully deny these claims, so that's just... I'm just putting it out there that is not confirmed, because his father denied it, but he said it happened, so there you go. As a child, he was said that he was very, very intelligent. He really did well in school, but then he dropped out of it. Don't really know why. I mean, he did want to follow religion and teach himself on religion, but as to why he decided to leave school when he was doing really well at it, I have no idea. So he dropped out when he was just 13 years old, and he had this obsession with the apocalypse and the Old Testament, and would really sort of educate himself on that. He was actually raised a Catholic, but he changed his religion to the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and then he decided to follow the way of life. But a bit later on, he would amend those rules, just to suit him, like you do. He decided to relinquish alcohol, tobacco, and processed foods in line with their religion. But then he didn't actually stay there long in that church, because he wanted to control the church. Later he wanted to ascend to leadership, and so the church was like, don't think so, and then they booted him out. There you go. But that's like a foreshadowing for what was gonna come, sadly. Despite the fact that he had been removed from this church, he'd already sort of began to get a following. He had a couple of members twisted around his little finger. He would go on about God, how he spoke to God. He was quite manipulative. He would tell little lies and about his background to make them, I don't know, believe it more, feel more sorry for him. Who knows at this point? But he was doing all this and manipulating them to follow him, essentially. He was going on about how he was people's saviour, how God had put him on this earth to avert the apocalypse that was coming, and that he was going to find these people a safe place until the end of the world happened, kind of thing. And that he was supposed to save the world from evil and it ending. He then came up with like an idea. He forced his followers to abandon their homes, their lives, their everything, and follow him, where he was going to make like this free-thinking community. He convinced them that not only were the loved ones corrupt, but also the world. And they accepted him for that. They accepted him. They accepted that they were going to follow God's teachings and follow Roch. By 1978, he was very delusional, and he was going on about how the apocalypse was coming in 1979, so they didn't have long. he was gonna move them on this path to something called the Eternal Mountain, which he would promise them would be safe from God's wrath, I guess. At the time, he had 4 men as followers, 9 women, and 4 children. So he was slowly building it up, and they moved to this Eternal Mountain. He claimed that this is where they would be saved and that they must build everything themselves. So whilst he just sat chilling, relaxing, not doing squat, he was just commanding them to do everything. They built tents, they built cabins, they built it all, everything that the community needed by hand, and he just watched. This is actually where he came up with the name of the group. He compared them to working like ants in an anthill, and that is where it came from. At that point, you've got to think that everyone's really tired from doing all this work, right? And he's just telling them what to do day in, day out. So it kind of became like second nature to him, because he's ordering them around, he's not doing squat, and then they're knackered and they're doing it all, but then they don't even have the energy to sort of confront him. So it just became second nature to him, by which point they were just following his orders regardless. So now we're into February of 1979, and that's supposed to be when the world was ending, right? Well, it didn't. So people were questioning him then, like, what on earth is going on? You said the world was ending, you said God was coming and destroying everything, but he hasn't. What's going on? He, of course, came up with an excuse. He said that it didn't happen because the time in God's world and our world are different. He would go on how the Israelite calendar and the Roman calendar were different. They didn't run parallel, and so he must have got the times mixed up as a result of that, but that the end was still coming. He just didn't get the correct day. Likely story. I mean, we're in 2022 now and the world has yet to end. There you go. Soon enough, life in the commune, the cult, turned into, well, the way it normally goes, as you guys know, if anyone has knowledge of these communities. And so it just went pretty strange and pretty horrific. He decided that he wanted to increase how many members they had. So there were 9 women in the group. So what does he do? He marries all 9 of them and impregnates them all multiple times. He ends up with 20 children from those 9 women. And then that meant that his following was up to 40 members. He made the followers wear identical tunics, and that was to represent the equality and the devotion to their community and to him. It didn't take long for the abuse to kick in. He became a totalitarian with their lives. He just, everything was run by him. Nobody could talk to each other without his say, or if he wasn't there. Nobody was allowed to have sexual relations with anyone if he didn't okay it. At this point, he had a bad drinking problem. So how he renounced alcohol, you know, you remember that? Well, now he decided that it was socially acceptable to drink socially, but yeah, he would drink a lot and get probably wasted, and then that would come with abuse, brutality, just being really aggressive towards his followers, and he would dish out very harsh punishments to people as well. Even though he was increasingly becoming more erratic and more abusive, the members didn't question him, and nor did they blame him for anything that he did either. If he considered a member of his community to be straying from the path, he would deal out brutal punishments. He would also spy on them to make sure that they weren't as well, and said that that was God's wish and God's plan. And then he would claim that, so he didn't say that he was spying on them, he would say that God told them, God told him about what they were doing. So, I don't know. They just really believed him. Sadly, over time, his punishments became more extreme and more violent, and when I say extreme, I mean extreme. In 1981, a young boy called Samuel Gilgary, apologies if I said that wrong, well, he had trouble going to the toilet, like urinating, okay? So what does Roch do? Well, he says that he can cure it and he knows how to do it, and so he cuts his you-know-what. Now, I don't know if it was like a slice or some of the skin off or what, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but yeah, he did that. And of course, this little boy is in so much pain, he is crying his eyeballs out, like you would. And then they punish him for that. He gets this guy called, well, he's literally called Guy. So he's called Guy Veer, and It was actually said by people around him and his actual family members that he was not fully there in the like mental capacity. It's just, put it this way, you would never ask him to carry out punishment on a child kind of thing. So he wasn't essentially fully compos mentis, and this was the person that he got to punish Samuel, right? So he starts beating on Samuel, and he actually beats the poor boy to death. That's how bad it got. So then Roch instructs him to burn the body, which they try, it doesn't really work, and then they end up burying him somewhere out there. So that's that. But then Guy needs punishment, right? So what he does as a punishment for Guy is he castrates him. And I believe that he actually died from that. So what they did is they had to cover this up, because they had been interacting with people in the outside world. So if Guy went missing, someone would notice. So they had to try and come up with an excuse. So what they did is Roch told his followers to say that he had been trampled by horses. And they go down to the local police station. They say that Guy Vere has been trampled by horses. And the police believed him because there were horses up there. Which makes no sense. He was literally missing a penis. But there you go. Or the other side of his penis. I'm not sure which he was missing. I don't think I want to know either. Eventually, the truth did come out. The police raided the compound and they did find the charred body of Samuel. Roch was arrested along with the others, and they were charged with negligence causing bodily harm. I know he spent some time in jail. I'm not entirely sure how long, but he did eventually get back out. And then guess what? You know, this cult community leader just started back up again, because why not? He still had some loyal followers. They'd been loyal to him throughout his entire time in jail, and then they did it all again. They established a community near somewhere called Burnt River. This was in Ontario, and here he had his followers, which included 26 children, most of which were his own, and of course the remaining followers that stayed with him throughout everything. They supported themselves by smoking fish and doing like bakery sales and things like that, like making maple syrup, doing preservatives. You know, that side of things is how they supported themselves monetary wise. From the outside looking in, the community kind of was just part of the wider community. You know, everyone accepted them. Nobody really knew what was going on inside closed walls, but inside those closed walls, Roch was getting worse and worse. He was drinking more. The more he drank, the more violent he became, and he had these crazy delusions that suddenly he was a doctor. I mean, the first instance with the little boy, he figured he could cure it, so he took action. But this time, he's thinking like he's some sort of miraculous surgeon who knows exactly what people's problems are, and then he operates on them, which is absolutely insane. Well, that's what he did. His followers were both too weak and too mentally exhausted, and also really believed him to actually get out of there. He would often make them do things like gladiator tournaments, and during these he would force them into like a dirt ring to fight each other, I guess for his own amusement. He became increasingly paranoid of his followers like leaving and just defecting from the group, and that made him even more violent, not like he needed it. Initially he would hit his followers, but then like I said, it escalated to way worse. He did things like, if he thought somebody was leaving, he would suspend them from the ceiling and pluck out their hairs one by one before defecating on them, which is disgusting. He even had them do things like proving their own loyalty by breaking their own legs with sledgehammers, which they did. He also ordered them to sit on lit stoves, shoot each other in the shoulder, smear feces on each other, cut off each other's toes. Honestly, horrific. He also would sexually assault his followers too, and then force them to eat their own feces. Yep. Not even the children were exempt from it. If they misbehaved, they would be abused, they would be... I don't know. They would have horrific things done to them. They were nailed to a tree and had rocks thrown at them. And even on one occasion, a mother who had just given birth to a baby actually went outside and put that baby out in the snow in the freezing temperatures because she allegedly didn't want the baby to suffer under his reign and the abuse that it would certainly come. I believe the baby did die. And I think that death led to an investigation going on in which 14 children were removed from the community. They were apparently only interested in saving the children, and so the community was allowed to just carry on with just the 2 men now and 8 women. And after this is when he decided that he could suddenly do surgery. Like I said, the more alcohol he drank, the more deluded he got. Who knows where it came from, but that's what he did. So one evening he placed a rubber band around a man's things. And of course it became really swollen and infected, and so he just chopped that right off. And then cauterized it with a hot iron. But crazier is yet to come, because in September of 1988, a woman called Solange Bolliard, apologies if I said the name wrong, actually had been complaining early in the day of a stomachache. Which I have come to learn that if you have an ailment, do not tell him, because he can fix it. He can fix it. So what he does is, yeah, he can fix this. He gets her to come and lie down on this table, naked, where he stuffs a plastic tube up her as an enema. He puts olive oil in it and molasses, and that's that. He then proceeds to cut open her stomach, pull out her intestines with his bare hands, rip a piece of the intestine off, and then stuffs it all back in, and then tells someone else to sew her up. Sure did cure her stomachache. Not really. So obviously, at that point, she is in absolute agony. Not only that, she's leaking fecal matter, most likely into her abdominal cavity, and obviously fecal peritonitis is really bad. It's not supposed to be in there. Well, it is, but not in that sense. It's supposed to be in your intestines, not inside of all the rest of your organs. It's really, really bad. It can cause these massive infections, and it is very likely to kill you, which is what happened to Solange. She lasted a day, I believe, until the next day. She was in desperate agony, and then she died. But let me just tell you this, right? Roch, he has the power now of resurrection, so he can bring her back. He killed her, but he can bring her back. So brilliant. So what he does is he says to his followers that they need to remove her uterus. I don't know why, but they do that. And also a part of her skull. Because Roch needs to, I don't even want to say this part, put something of himself in the skull, and that will make her come back to life. I mean, sadly, it really didn't work. And so he just ordered his followers to go and bury her body on the grounds instead. But before they did that, he took one of her ribs as a trophy that he would keep around his neck. Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Then in November of 1988, another member of his community called Gabrielle Lavallee, again, probably said it wrong, my apologies, she complained that she had a toothache. What does he do? He gets some pliers and he pulls out loads of her teeth. Probably not even the one that she had a toothache in. It won't surprise me. Later on that night, he chased her around with a knife and cut one of the tendons in her hands. She had toothache, not handache. Then in July of 1989, he decided that he was going to impale one of Gabrielle's hands with a knife, which he did. And that was after she had complained that she had stiffness in her hand. So stabbing it to the table with a knife obviously is a cure for hand stiffness, apparently. He then decided that that wasn't good enough and that he needed to actually amputate her full arm, which he did so with a meat cleaver. She lay in agony on the kitchen floor until her wound, a stub, was stitched up. And that was done the following morning. Honestly. At this point, she decided that she'd had enough. He's pulled out her teeth, he stabbed her hand, and now he's chopped it all off. You know, she's finally had enough. And so she decides that she's going to escape. And that was on the 16th of August, and she actually did manage to escape as well. She ends up taking herself to a hospital, where the whole disgusting and disturbing truth about everything that was going on in that community finally comes out. And of course, Roch was arrested. Finally. He pled guilty to 3 counts of aggravated assault and 1 count of unlawfully causing bodily harm. From that, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. And then later on, I don't know like who it was, but another of the community members led authorities to the body of Solange. And so then he was to be tried again for the murder of Solange. He pled guilty then to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole until 2000, I believe. But then in 2001, that was denied, which thank goodness for that. And the story doesn't quite end there, because in 2011, the 26th of February to be exact, he was 63 years old at that point. He was obviously rotting away in jail, and somebody killed him. He was found dead close to his cell, had been stabbed with a shiv, and it's thought that he actually got into like this disagreement with his cellmate, Matthew Gerard MacDonald, who was, I believe, 60 years old, and he was a convicted killer. They got into some sort of disagreement over whatever, and basically he just stabbed him to death. I think it was in the neck, actually. I think he stabbed him in the neck with like a shiv, and then he casually, just calmly walked to the guard station and said to the guard, well, he handed over the shiv and said to the guard, "That piece of shit is down on the range. Here's the knife. I've sliced him up." And that was the end of Roch. And that is the end of our story. This case was absolutely crazy. Honestly, just who? Why did he pull her intestines out? I can't get past that. She had a bellyache, so he pulls out her intestines. Honestly, it's absolutely horrific. All of the people that was under his abuse, and sadly part of this community, all of the lives that were lost as a result of him, and this monster thinking that he was some sort of person from God and doing all these religious things when it was so far from it. It's unbelievable, and this case is very disturbing. So yeah, that is the end of it. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of the Anthill Kids. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.